All right, 1 second here. All right, welcome everyone to this Q&A. Again, I want to welcome everyone to this Q&A. A few things came in. We'll see where they go. First question is, someone asked, if government personnel that represent a country, right? Again, we're not talking about necessarily insurgents over here, or terrorism or whatever, but let's say government itself try to kill innocent civilians. Question is it considered an act of war against the people according to the Torah? Now, it's kind of a loaded question. No pun intended. We have to analyze, exactly what's meant over here. According to the Torah, would a person have a right to defend themselves? They have a right to defend themselves. Right? I don't think there's any question about that. Is it an act of war? I mean, it depends what you mean by an act of war. If it's something, let's say there's a military takeover, or something like that, or let's say a military coup, right? Let's say better. If there's a military coup or something like that, then is it considered something, is it an act of war? Well, it sounds like an act of war. I don't think there's any question about that. The question is what resolve the people in the country have. Can they stand up against these rogue people? Now the question is, what happens if you do? Would that be called suicide, knowing that you stand up against them? They could, kill you, put you in jail, other things. We know certainly what happened to the Jews in Europe during the Second World War. So they did exactly that. Deported people, killed them, murdered them. I mean, the list goes on, right? The horrific list goes on over here. So people had no power here. See, just, as a side point over here, if we say that the German Shemach Shemoy V'Zichroi, may the name be blotted out, may they rot wherever they are, if they were, many rabbinic authorities hold that they were from Amalek. They're from the people of Amalek. Now, that being the case, people of Amalek are a bunch of wusses. Why do I say they're a bunch of wusses, as we would say in Boston? They're a bunch of wusses because how do they fight? They don't fight straight up. What does the Torah tell me? They fight the weak. They fight the ones that cannot defend themselves. Right? 100% they can't defend themselves. So, not to mention sheer cruelty. So it could very well be that, the Germans had the status of Amalek, right? Could very well be. But in such a case, what were the people supposed to do? What could they have done? They didn't have an army. They didn't have a standing army, right? Some people make the claim that, now we're not gonna go like sheep to the slaughter. Well, that's all fine and dandy. But see, what happened, I've heard this, a number of different ways, but it comes out the same, right? And that is that, people think, oh, had I been there, there would have been this insurrection. Okay, there was eventually, in a small way. But see, they got hit, they didn't even know what hit them. They were surrounded on all sides. So it's not really a fair comparison. Because the reality is, they didn't have an army, they didn't have weapons, they didn't have anything. Right? So how were they made? How were they like street to the slaughter? What could they have done? They couldn't do much of anything. 100% they couldn't do much of anything. So that's a false claim. But, in the bigger scheme of things, they didn't know what to hit them. Taken out in the middle of the night, all kinds of things. But see, like we said before, it's not a fair fight over here. And the reason is because they are, they have no weapons, they have no way to defend themselves. Now, is that an act of war? Sounds like an act of war. I mean, in this case, they're singling out one group, right? One group of people. So I'll make it easy. In that case, is that considered an act of war? Even if it is. Even if I would agree it's an act of war, what could they have done? Couldn't have done anything. You live in a country that's going on. You can either flee or try and get out if possible, or you stick it out. I don't know what the difference is if it's considered an act of war or not. I mean, I think probably what the person meant is, can they bear arms? They can bear arms. I mean, they can try and fight it, probably get slaughtered in the process. Somebody points out that, the states government acting against people, killing them like China. Okay, maybe. Singling people out, but I don't think that's an old thing. Right? It's just, things happen, we don't know about it. Could be, some things maybe more blatant today, maybe. Very well, could be. Well, the question over here is it considered an act of war? Is it an act of war? So now you have to define what war is. There are two types of war according to the Torah. There's what we call a milchemes mitzvah and a milchemes reshus. A milchemes mitzvah means that it's a war you're obligated to go out and fight. Everybody goes out and fight. Right? Nobody's sitting and learning. Everyone's going to fight. Right? Throw any time to the temple. Jewish people had an army. Times King David, they had an army. Someone comes and declares war against you. You defend yourself. Right? That's true. But if you're living in a country, let's say they single you out. Let's say in the States or other places, God forbid they would single out Jews. And they make a war against them. Just like Hitler and Yamach Shemoy did. So what are they supposed to do? Right? It's not even a question, what are they supposed to do? Question is that a war against the Torah, according to the Torah? So we don't have prophets today. Right? But if we did have prophets, again, here we're talking about something specific, we're talking about the Jewish people in the land of Israel. Right? So that, a prophet comes down and says, okay, got to go to war. Everybody goes to war. If it's what we call milchemes reshus, a war that we're not obligated to fight. I mean, we have to defend ourselves, but it's not that type of war. probably what I would say today is like, what goes on in Israel against the Arabs. Right? That's not an obligatory. I mean, you have to, Israel has to defend themselves. No question about it. No question. So if that's the case, okay, they're allowed to defend themselves. 100%, they're allowed to defend themselves. Now, does that mean everyone has to go to war? Or everyone has to be drafted? No. Even though secular will say the ultra-Orthodox are not upholding their end of the bargain. We're not taking on, as they would claim, we're not taking on the burden, but it's not obligatory war. First of all, they don't need us. That's another issue. But the fact is, they have plenty of people in the army. That's not what we call an obligatory war. Everybody goes to fight. And if it would be an obligatory war, everyone goes to fight. But remember, there are always people sitting and learning. Even with an army during the time of King David and others. So you can't have one without the other. Because the success of the Jews that are going to fight is only going to be because the people learn and pray. I don't think there's any question. If you look at, wars in Israel since, the founding of the state, unbelievably miraculous. Nothing to talk about. No one will disagree. It's unbelievably miraculous. Even the Israelis were saying, we have the upper hand and we have the power and this and that. Yeah, they got caught off guard a number of times. During the 6-day war, they were preparing tens of thousands of body bags. Right? So everyone would agree these wars are miraculous. It wasn't the power of the Israelis over here. It's a miracle, no question. It's how these miracles happen because you have people learning and praying. Because, you put them in war against these armies over and over and over again, they should lose. I mean, I would probably say 8, 9 times out of 10, they lose significantly. Not just they lose some here or there. They get wiped out, taken over. Close to 100% of the time. Want to tell me, maybe a few times the underdog wins, maybe. But in this case, you can't say that. You cannot say that. It's unbelievably miraculous. So you need people praying. You need people learning. Because if you don't have that, there's no hope over here. And if you look what's going on, since the founding of the state, it's unbelievable. Miracle after miracle. So it's not the might of the army. For sure not the might of the army. Other things going on. I mean, you got all these countries surrounding Israel. So, okay, most people know we have nuclear weapons. Don't tell anyone. We have nuclear weapons. So that's a good deterrent. Doesn't stop Hamas, right? Doesn't stop terrorists inside Israel. All kinds of things. But the reality is, being surrounded on all sides doesn't lend too well to be successful. I'm not saying there haven't been casualties. There have been casualties, over the years and from terrorist attacks, right? That is no question. But it could be a heck of a lot worse. It could be a heck of a lot worse. I'll give one example. Right? I hope there are no enemies of Israel here listening. Give one example. A number of years ago, there are Arabs going on buses attacking people. All these terror attacks all over. I mean, if they wanted to, people legally allowed to be in Israel, they can send tens, hundreds of people in one shot, different places of the country. You can't stop that. Unless you just don't let them in. But you can't, that's impossible to stop. Arab gets on a bus, can start clubbing people, knifing people. You can't stop it. Right? There's one guy made a video. It's actually pretty funny. He makes a video in American, and he says, any Arab comes, they want to attack me on a bus. I got my Louisville Slugger. I got my baseball bat. Great. And when someone's stabbing you, baseball bat not going to help that much. Caught you off guard, which they do. There's some women carried like a small iron. Someone carried a what do you call it? A thing you need dough with, a rolling pin, for protection. I mean, if they really wanted to, couldn't they do this all the time? They can do it all the time. I don't want to give anyone good advice. 100% they can do it all the time. Nothing's stopping them if they're allowed in the country. Why not? They don't value life anyway, certainly not their own. So what in the world is stopping them? And what, let's say better, this went on for weeks. Right? So why did it stop? It could have continued for months. Why did it stop? It wasn't because they stopped people from coming in. They had people coming in also. Right? But the army will say, we foiled this attack, foiled that attack. Okay. But why eventually did it stop? You know why it stopped? Because God wanted it to stop. People ask the question, we're not going to get too political in other ways. The SARS virus, many years ago, right? Starting to wreak havoc, disappeared. How did it disappear? No vaccine. Doesn't matter what people say about the vaccine or not. There's no vaccine. Disappeared. They were preparing for the worst. Why did it disappear? Climate change? I don't know. Maybe we come up with some reason. But you know why it changed? You know why it stopped? Because God wanted to stop. God wanted to stop. You see the thing with COVID, it's not stopping. Boggles the mind. Got so many people vaccinated, whatever you want to say about the vaccine. And now, numbers are jumping. Totally jumping there. So obviously God wants it around for whatever reason. But you see things like this, they stop and they start only because God wants it. For any number, again, we're not privy to that information. Why he does, why he doesn't. Give one example. We don't know, we get into politics. Just give one other example. You got Mr. Putin over here going into Ukraine, makes no sense. No sense at all. All of a sudden now out of nowhere. So we say, Lev Malachim biyad Hashem. The hearts of the kings are in the hand of God. So God wanted to do this. Why? Don't know. Going to be payback. Certainly for what the Ukraine did to Jews. Yeah, going to be payback for them what they did to Jews. A lot of people dying on each side. Yeah. We want all the Jews to get out and whatever, but they both have it coming. We've spoken about that. So why now? Doesn't make any sense. No sense at all. Not to mention the fact, that the U.S. was sending, hundreds of thousands of barrels of oil to Russia, financing the war. That also makes no sense. Where gas prices going up, going up the gazoo. Okay, we're not going to get into politics, but why? Why all of a sudden now? We don't know. Maybe we'll see in the future. We'll see how things, if they snowball, they don't, or what's going to be. But we don't know why. God could end it. God can make it get worse. Could be the start of the beginning and the end. Could be any number of things. We don't know. But why they start and why they stop and all these things, it's whatever God wants. But make no mistake, certainly what goes on in Israel is miraculous. I don't think there's any question. Right? So the question over here was, well, is it an act of war? Of course it's an act of war. Right? If they're going to kill innocent civilians, right, government personnel, that's an act of war. Seemingly be an act of war. Question is, can civilians fight against it? You see what's going on in China. Anyone remembers Tiananmen Square, right? People got killed. A lot of things happened. But they got sick and tired of what's going on. And, not like they defended themselves, declared war, but, they certainly protested. And could be, protests got demolished also, okay? Right? So the question was, is this an act of war? Now again, if they're singling out Jews, does that mean we have to go to war against them? We try and stop it. What if you can't stop it? They got power. What if they do the same thing happened by a German? Yamach Shimon v'Zichron in all of Europe. Then even if it is an act of war, how are you going to fight that? All the borders are sealed, can't get out, trapped like rats, no pun intended. Even if it is an act of war, what can they do? They don't have a standing army. What are they supposed to do? Now, if you would tell me today, let's say what happened in an X country, they would single out Jews. What would Israel do? Is it going to send in people try and stop it? Could be. Could very well be, but they get all kinds of flack for doing it. They're only a small country. They can't spread themselves out too thin. I mean, there's a lot of things going on. So, do they have a right to defend themselves? They do. They have a right to defend themselves. Right? The question is an act of war according to the Torah. So if they go against the Jewish people, the land of Israel, that's an act of war. 100% an act of war. Question is, what do you do now? That really wasn't the question. I'm asking the question now. So now what? All right, so what do you do now? How do you defend or not? So they're allowed to. They'll be allowed to defend themselves. Might cost their lives, 100%. But see, a war according to the Torah, if it's an obligatory war, you need a prophet to tell you to go to war. You need a prophet to tell you don't need to go to war, but you need to defend yourself. Right? So there's a difference between the two. The difference is that if it's an obligatory war, everybody goes to fight. If the prophet says obligatory, you all go. Doesn't matter. Someone just recently married. Normally the first year they wouldn't go out to war. Right? They don't leave home too much. But if it's an obligatory war, doesn't matter. Person got married a week before, 2 days before, goes to war. That's a war according to the Torah. Sorry, that's an obligatory war. If it's not an obligatory war, then obviously not everyone has to go. But you need to defend yourself. So there's been this war, quote unquote, going on for years. It's not like you have all the other nations joining against Israel. You don't have that. I mean, even though we saw during the Gulf War, it's Saddam Hussein attack, okay. But it's not like you have all these other nations attacking all at once, like it used to be. Everyone's been put at bay. I mean, you don't need an army. If they attack, okay, you have to defend yourself. That's an act of war. Right? Attack, according to this, when Hamas sends missiles, right, and they go into Sderot and other places close by, it's an act of war there. Who are they targeting? Civilians. They're not targeting the army. Whoever they hit should be an act of war according to them. They're innocent. 100% they're innocent. Hamas may say differently, doesn't matter. But they're innocent. They're not provoking anything. They just want to live in peace. So yeah, that would be an act according to the Torah. But again, even if it would be, and under all kinds of different circumstances, what do I do? What do you do in such a case? Can you have an armed rebellion? Try and stop it? Could. Nothing saying you can't. A lot of people may die in the process. That's also true. 100% true. All right. So the issue is, You got to take the question further. If we say it's an act of war, okay, so now what? Are they allowed to kill innocent civilians? No. Are the civilians allowed to defend themselves? They should. Why shouldn't they be allowed to defend themselves? They're allowed to defend themselves. Okay, could they, is that called suicide? No. They're allowed to defend themselves. Like what happened, during World War II. They had no access to weapons in general. And they were trapped. They couldn't get out. Right? That's definitely an act of war. Yeah, a lot of questions here. Someone asks, a lot of Jewish people, highly political. Yeah, putting faith in leaders in non-Jewish nations. Oh, yes. Do I think it's a problem? And then an offshoot question, to vote for the modern equivalent of saying, bow down, be a form of idolatry, worshiping the leaders. All right, let's hit the first question. This is a huge topic. It's a good question. Because the problem is you live in a country that's not yours. Right? Meaning, a person's a Jew, they always say double loyalty. No, there's one loyalty. One loyalty to the Jewish people. Right? The state of Israel. Now, people say, what about loyalty to where you live? Not saying the person shouldn't have gratitude, right? They're living in a place where, they have free rights, and all that. Certainly, let's say in the States, been probably the best country to the Jews ever, second to none, but Jews have paid a price, serious price, where most of the Jews there totally assimilated out. So, it definitely comes at a price, but that's not the question. The question is, Jews put a lot of faith in public servants. You're right. Right? Even Jewish leaders, Jewish senators, religious people that have power or whatever. So, is this a problem? Let me say it like this. During World War II, people asked the question, where was God during the Holocaust? So what's the answer? Well, God's always where he always is. So what's the question? They say, no, why did God kill 6 million Jews? Well, it takes a lot of people to kill 6 million Jews. You have the Germans, you have the Latvians, you have the Ukrainians, you have the Russians, you have the Poles, you have the Hungarians, the list goes on. That's not the question where God is. The question is, where is man? Right? That's the question. Now, if we're going to use that as an example, what's one thing, a positive thing that we can learn out from the Holocaust? And the positive thing is, you never, ever, ever, as we would say in Boston, you never rely on man. I understand. See, this is my specialty back in college, back in universities, World War II. Let's understand one thing. America did not want to get in the war. 100%, they had no interest getting involved. Comes along Pearl Harbor, okay, they had no choice. But there were boats that came to the States, the refugees, they sent them back to die. They also got blood on their hands. Right? Now, you could tell me, isn't it understandable if they accept Jews into the country? If they accept these refugees, look how many people are going to want to come, and all that. But they don't want to get involved in the war. And they're saying, we're not going to get involved, whatever. God says, you get involved. You're going to get involved to end the war. How are they going to get involved? God has to orchestrate something to get them involved. What does he do? It's called Pearl Harbor. My father, bless his memory, remembers when Pearl Harbor happened, and they sent the kids home from school. I remember that was the whole thing. Well, a huge tragedy. But that got them involved in the war. Otherwise, they never would have got involved. They had no interest. They knew what was going on. Jewish leaders begged them just to send planes to bomb the railways so they couldn't, take more Jews, to be killed. They knew what was going on. They didn't want to get involved. Now you could say, makes a lot of sense why they wouldn't want to get involved. Okay. But what do we understand? Right? What's one thing we can take out? One very simple thing we can take out is man's not in control here. You got to put your best foot forward. That we have an obligation to do. Right? We have to put our best foot forward. So, Jewish leaders pleaded with the president, different gatherings, all kinds of things. Okay. You put your best foot forward, but remember one thing. The president's not the one that runs the world. Certainly not this buffoon who's in power. Right? He's not the one in control. You know who's in control? We just said before. Leiv Malachim b'yad Hashem. The heart of kings are in the hand of God. He's the one controlling them. He's the one telling them this, that, and the other thing, telling them to do whatever, putting ideas in their head for God's purpose, whatever it is. The one thing we learn out from here, right? Someone asked, I think is a lot of, the problem, Jewish people putting faith in leaders in non-Jewish nations. What about Jews in power? What about Jews in power? Senators or whatever. Putting your faith in them is also wrong. Whatever power they have doesn't matter. You're putting the faith in man. Putting faith in non-Jewish nations, also bad. Also bad. I'll give an example. We're learning now. I go up north twice a week. We're just going to start tomorrow. Learning the laws of damages, or starting with the laws of judges, where I make someone a rabbinic court judge in all kinds of different cases, about that. And what if they make mistakes, whatever. Next thing we're going to learn tomorrow is that, a Jew's not allowed, we spoke about this last week, but I want to make one point. And that is, Jews are not allowed to go to secular courts, even if they're run by Jews. Right? Secular court here in Israel, anywhere else. Two Jews have an issue, and one says it caused me damage, they owe me money. You have to go to base. You have to go to the rabbinical court. If you invite someone to come, first time he doesn't come, you invite him a second time. Second time he doesn't come, then the basin's going to call him up, shake him down a little bit. The third time he doesn't come, they're going to hear the case from the other person. If he's got what to say, he's got a good case, they're going to send him to secular court. Now, what would happen? Now, why am I bringing this up? Because what would happen, I was just learning this earlier, what would happen if a secular court forces two Jews to go to base? In other words, they want to come to secular court. And the secular court says, why are you coming to us? You have your own law courts. Imagine getting Musa from a non-Jew. Getting Musa from a non-Jew saying, your Torah says you have your own law courts. So you have to go before your own law courts, not before a secular court. Right? So the commentary says, if the non-Jews force Jews to go to Basin, which, on the surface level, it's not a bad thing. Why is it not a bad thing? Because they're gonna have proper judgments. Because secular law is skewed according to the Torah. Now, what about non-Jews? Don't they have to have their own law courts? According to Noahide laws? Yeah, that's good for them, not for us. Unless you have no choice. Unless the person has no other recourse, and you have to go to secular court. But the commentaries say, this is why I'm bringing it up. Commentaries say, unbelievable. They say like this. They say if a secular court forces Jews to go to rabbinical court, that's called the Chilul Hashem. That is called the desecration of God's name. Now the question is, they're already in secular court. If they're already in secular court, I mentioned this last week, does the rabbinical court, does the Beis Din have an obligation to take them now and listen to them now or not? Right? First of all, anytime someone goes to secular court, two Jews, every second they transgress. They transgress a Torah prohibition every second until that case is nullified and taken out of court. So there are two opinions. One opinion is Beis Din should take them. If they have regret, they have remorse, they say, yeah, it was a stupid thing to do. We want to come to rabbinical court. They should take them. They should listen to the case. The other opinion is, you're coming to us now. Now you see you're going to lose in secular court. You think you're going to get a better shake, a better shot by us. You're going to get, whatever you lose, it's your fault. Two different opinions. But the idea over here is that when secular court says you have to go to rabbinic court, you have to go to the Beis Din, even though maybe Beis Din should take them, and they should take the case anyway, but they force them. That's a desecration of God's name. Why is it desecration of God's name? I need a non-Jew to tell me what to do, my own laws. No offense to any non-Jews listening here, right? I have to listen to judge whoever to say, Coffman, you have to go to Beis Din. You have to go to Beis Din because that's the law and your law. No embarrassment. Isn't that tremendous embarrassment? I tell you like this, let's take it further. Take it one step further. There are stories of the Dali Lama, the holy Dali Lama, who have taken Jews and sent them back to Israel to learn Torah. Imagine, person got caught up in Buddhism, and they meet the Dali Lama. Right? There have been a number of cases where, Jews, secular Jews, got into Buddhism, meet the Dali Lama, and the Dali Lama says, you know what? You're coming to us. We have nothing to offer you. Come on, you have your own Torah. Go back to Israel. Go back to Israel. And he was the impetus of making certain people religious. Unbelievable story. Why am I bringing this out? You got to take someone who's an Ovdei Avodah Zarah. There's non-Jew who's an Ovdei Avodah Zarah, right? Who does idolatry, the highest level. And he's telling you to go learn your own religion. So you say, well, it's a good thing. Listen, they became religious Jews. True. I'm not going to deny that. There's a lot of truth to that, 100%. But imagine the embarrassment, right? Maybe the Dalai Lama will get credit over here, right? Took somebody, said, wait. He said, you're Jewish. Oh, I got the perfect person for you. He made a shidduch. He made a match. You get some sort of credit for that, right? But I'm pointing out the negative side. And the negative side is you got somebody, the higher up, the highest up there is, by the Muslims. And they say, we got nothing to offer. You should go learn Judaism. What a slap in the face. What a punch in the nose. You got the Dali Lama, the holy Dali Lama, and he's telling you, go learn Torah. You should be embarrassed. You should be embarrassed. The Dali Lama of all people. He's telling you should learn Musar and learn Torah. What about the Pope? Popesy. Popesy would say, yeah, we have nothing to offer. You want to be a priest? Come on. It's really a whole lie. We don't really believe in it anyway. Go back to your roots. Imagine getting slapped upside the head by the priest, by the Pope. Popesy. Okay. He sent you in the right direction. The person benefited. True. Even if that would be true. You're getting hit upside by the Pope. How can you not be embarrassed by that? Because they, well, there is a positive side. I agree. There's a positive side. Right? But you get somebody who's an idol worshiper at the highest degree telling you we have nothing to offer, go learn your own religion. You need the Pope to tell you that? You need the Dalai Lama to tell you that? Okay, it happened. That's how far gone they are. We're going to sit here and rely on men. We're going to rely on the nations. Never, ever rely on anybody. Jew or non-Jew. You never, ever, ever rely on anyone except God himself. Now, comes on the Chovos Levavos. As he says in Duties of the Heart, guess what? You got to put your best foot forward. True. Can't just say, well, I'm going to rely on God. There are other things you have to do. You might have to meet with world leaders, other things. Okay. You might have to rely, on Jews or non-Jews for certain things. Okay? That's putting your best foot forward. But guess what? Who runs the world? Non-Jews run the world? Jews run the world? No, God runs the world. God's the one in charge. So if he's the one in charge, I have to have absolute faith he's going to take care of things. However it works itself out, he's the one in charge. It ain't man. Because we've been burnt. We've been burnt literally, allegorically. There have been times there were decrees, and we were able to bribe people and get decrees thrown away and get them nullified. Very true. But that's putting your best foot forward. That's what we have to do. That's our obligation. But we're not relying on them. Because what they say, they can say one thing and totally lie. And then 5 minutes later, a week later, say, "No, I was just kidding." You can't rely on men. You don't rely on anybody. One of the things I saw, I was at my Rebbe in the rabbinical court, and this, probably the most powerful rabbinical court in the world. People are going there, are religious people. It's not like the chief rabbinate, anyone from off the street comes in, whatever their cases are. These are like the religious of the religious. Big hats, long coats, short coats, long coats, this, that. And people having claims against others, lies, people who lie, fraud, other things. So everyone would say it's a good thing you have a connection to me, because if you see what goes on here, by religious people, you're like, why did I become religious in the first place? When you see what goes on. Right? It did boggle the mind. People admit it. Yeah, I lied, I this, I that. We're not talking secular Jews. You might think they're secular because of what they've done, but they pray 3 times a day. They keep kosher, keep other laws. You don't rely on man. But here the question was, do you rely on non-Jewish nations? No. You don't rely on anybody. I would say even here in Israel, we're going to rely on the government? No. They don't want what's best for us, that's for sure. Secular Jews you don't rely on. They have no believability, even in secular court. Under most circumstances. They have no believability. You're going to say, but Jews are the chosen people. Yeah, when they're not doing what they're supposed to do, are they any different than non-Jews? No different. Dress the same, talk the same. No difference. Totally no difference over here. Right? So if that's the case, and we rely on them, so we're not going to rely on Israelis for me. They'll do whatever they can, push us out. As one leftist minister many years ago said explicitly, I don't have to make this up, said on the radio. Right? What they say? So they said, when we finish with the Arabs, we're going to take care of the Haredim. We're going to take care of the ultra-Orthodox. They weren't kidding. Tremendous hatred. Tremendous hatred. Okay, that's what it is. That's part of the Arab. That's part of the mixed multitude. So I wouldn't rely on secular Israelis, not to save my life. In general. You can say, but you rely on the army, okay? Right? But God's the one who runs the world here. You need a standing army, true? That's definitely true, right? But you're getting benefit from them, okay? But they're not the ones controlling things. They're not the ones in charge. God's the one in charge. Not them. So I wouldn't rely on them. I wouldn't rely on non-Jews. You rely on God. But, of course, there's always a but. And the but is you got to put your best foot forward. You got to do what it takes. Right? But who's the one calling the shots? You go to someone, you ask a favor for whatever. Now, they could help you or they couldn't help you if they're in a position to help. And if they don't want to help you and this and that, okay. You put your best foot forward. That doesn't mean that's where you're going to get saved from. Certainly not. Right? Last week's parsha, my Rebbe brings down famous story when he was a child with Rabbi Chaim Coffman, Hashem Yikam Damoy. God should avenge his blood. And it says by Bilam, and everyone's going to read this week, outside of Israel, Parshas Balak, it says that in the same sentence, he uses the word of a nation, right? A goy and an am. Both mean similar things. So Rabbi Chaim came to raise money for the yeshiva in Baranovich. So he spoke before Musaf on Shabbos, in the synagogue, and Shlomo was there, and he spoke, and he's there to raise money for the yeshiva. But the problem was he heard that there were people there that were very strong Zionists. But they were very strong Zionists. So what did he do? He spoke against the Zionists. He said, I forget which one he said, whether it's an Am or a Goy, that one of them, when you talk about a nation, they may not have their own lands, but maybe they have their own dress, they have their own laws, etc. But there are those who think that if we have our own lands, but their customs and this and that don't matter, he said that, it's not a blessing over here. So he went on and started deriding, Zionism and starting demolishing it. He says you can't have that one without the other. How can you have a land without Torah, without mitzvahs? That's the whole point. God took us out of Egypt for what? To eat shrimp? Right? Torah says took us out to distinguish from the pure, the impure. He didn't take us out to eat shrimp. Why did he take us out? To be a nation, to be a holy nation, to go to the land of Israel, not just to have a nation of Jews. Having a nation of Jews, that's not the point of what the land of Israel is for. It's about sanctifying the land. It's about keeping Torah, keeping mitzvahs. That's what it's about. So we started going on and on and on. So people got upset, as you could imagine. They made a protest, and most of the synagogue left and prayed, Musaf in the corridor. The Sturbach says there's only like a handful of people left. We had 10 men, right? To finish prayers over here. So he was a kid at the time. So he asked Rabbi Chaim afterwards. He said, "What's going to be with the yeshiva? Weren't you here to raise money?" He says, "Don't worry." He says, "Don't worry. I put my best foot forward. Money doesn't come through here. It'll come somewhere else. Just because I put my effort in here doesn't mean I'll be successful here. Right? But I had to tell people there's a disease and how bad it's going to be. And that's what it was. It's talking about Zionism. But I'll make one other point on that similar story. There was dire straits during the war, and he went to collect money for the yeshiva. And he had to take cabs and this and that. People slammed the door in his face. People didn't answer the door. People scared him away. He didn't make any money. Not only that, he lost money because of, he had to take cabs and different things. So next day, Moshe Schneider calls him over, and he's terrified to go see him. So Moshe Schneider tells him, he says, you get a Yasher Koach. You did a great job. Sturbach laughed. He goes, "What are you talking about? Great job." He said, "I wasted the yeshiva's money. I didn't bring in any money." He says, "Nah, you put your best foot forward. Doesn't matter. I wasn't expecting, you to save the yeshiva, but guess what? Someone just gave us enough money, for like the next 2 months." And he said, "But you put your best foot forward. Doesn't mean you're going to see success that way. Doesn't mean that. But what happened? Success came differently. Came in a different way. Right? Don't we see that in our own lives? We see it a lot. Person thinks, this is going to happen. That's going to happen. This is going to save me and whatever. And guess what? God has other ideas. And just when you think, this is going to happen, something else happens out of the blue. Out of the blue. So, what they say, when you least expect it. But, okay, I got to put my best foot forward. Putting my best foot forward means over here that I'm not relying, right? And that's the point. That was the first part of the question. You're not putting your faith in non-Jewish nations. I'm telling you, not even putting faith in the Jewish nation. Because they're mostly the Arab brother, the mixed multitude. I wouldn't put my faith in them either. Our faith is in God. We have to put our best foot forward, 100%. No one's going to disagree. We have to put our best foot forward. But by putting our best foot forward, we have to remember one thing. And that is who runs the world. God's the one who runs the world. Right? Now, second part of the question was to vote for, to be modern equivalent of saying, I don't bow down to. Therefore, is that a form of idolatry? Worshiping the leaders. Leaders can be bought. Leaders, there's no amount. Or someone once told me, he says, don't worry, when it comes to honor, there's no sheer, there's no amount. There's no minimum amount, no maximum amount. So it comes now, there is an issue. There is an issue that there's a Torah prohibition of what we call sucking up, hanifa. You're not allowed to suck up and to lie to someone. So I just read, there's a story with the Rabbi Chaim, and the Rabbi Chaim needed a secular Jew, needed a favor from the secular Jew for whatever it was, and he had to write him a letter. So he wanted to say, how's he going to address it? To the honorable whoever, anything he thought about saying, he said I would have been over a Torah prohibition, I would have transgressed the Torah prohibition of Hanifa. Or basically sucking up over here. Or basically showing honor to someone you can't show honor to. Now the question is, so what about a head of state? What about a head of state? Or a minister you need a favor from? You got to be careful. You got to be careful. You're not allowed to say how great he is. You're not allowed to flatter. That's the word. Hanifa, you can't flatter somebody. That doesn't deserve to be flattered. It's a Torah prohibition. It's a severe prohibition. So the Rabbi Chaim didn't know what to do, and he said, you know what? God's going to take care of things. I can't write him a letter. He didn't write him a letter. It took care of itself. Right? So I would say like this, if we're sucking up and flattering a minister because we need favor or whatever, it's a problem of Hanifa. Now, again, doesn't that mean I have to put my best foot forward? If I need help, I can ask them for help. You're right. But if this person's scum of the earth in general, which a lot of them are, then I can't praise them. I can thank them for what they've done, but I cannot flatter them. Flattering is a problem. It's Torah prohibition. Torah prohibition. So is that worshiping them? No, it's not worshiping them. Worshiping them, here what are you doing? You're asking them for a favor. You're asking them for help. Right? So what are you doing? You want their help. That's not worshiping them. But I would put this under the category that if you're using flattery language or you're flattering them, yeah, that's a problem. That's not idolatry. 100% that's not idolatry. It's a different issue. Right? The issue over here is flattery. And it could be a Jew or a non-Jew. We don't discriminate over here. A secular Jew, I have to flatter him. Why? Because he knows a lot in medicine. I don't have to flatter him. I can thank him. He helped me and, whatever. Flattering's a problem. Someone who desecrates God's name. Right? Someone who desecrates Shabbos in public. Can't flatter him. Can't even say amen to their blessing. So you can't flatter them. You do that, Torah prohibition. Now, that doesn't mean I'm worshiping them. If I ask them for help for something, but you can't give them you can't give them a name or whatever. You can't flatter them and say how great they are, this, that, because that's Torah prohibition. That's a Torah prohibition, which I'm not allowed to do. So if I'm not allowed to do it, you can show gratitude. Gratitude is okay. 100% gratitude is okay. But I can't flatter them. Right? Can't flatter them. Flatter them is forbidden. 100%. Someone asked, how do you explain everything's from God, someone who doesn't believe in it? Well, it's very easy. I'm not going to go through it now. I have a bunch of videos on Tanakh Talk explaining proof for God's existence. But nobody today is a real atheist. They may claim to be, right? But someone who thought about a few seconds, yeah, I'm an atheist. Now, what's the obvious question you ask them? You say, really, you're an atheist? See, if they say they're agnostic, okay. An agnostic just says, I think there's a God, but I'm not sure. I don't have proof. Right? So, okay, very good. Did you research it? Did you study philosophy? Socrates, Aristotle? No. Okay. Did you study, modern philosophy? Kant, Kierkegaard, Hegel? No. Study Lahavdil, Jewish philosophy. Maimonides, Yehuda Levi? No. To read the Bible from cover to cover, a little bit. So the obvious answer is you're not an atheist, you're an idiot. You haven't done any research. Right? So you got to break down. Why don't they believe in God? Right? All you have to do is show them the human body, right? Miracles of the human body, miracles of nature. Right? That enough shows it has to be a world of design. And that's how Abraham came to his conclusion. Whether the age of 3 or the age of 40. Right? Those are a couple ways, but I would recommend, watching those videos that I spoke quite a bit about that. Let me see. There are other questions here. Someone asked, what do you think of Hiskiyahu ben David, aka Rabbi Shlomo Yehuda? Did he claim to be Mashiach? I have no idea. I don't think so. But in any case, Mashiach's not going to be revealed. He's only going to be revealed by Elijah the prophet. So there is a Messiah in every generation. The only question is, doesn't he have the ability to reveal himself? If he doesn't have the ability to reveal himself, right, then the spark will go to someone else. Then the spark will go to someone else. Right? So nobody, there is one person every generation, who's got the potential of being the Messiah. Question is if he has the ability to reveal himself. And if he doesn't, then it'll be passed on to someone else. Someone asked, is completing an Orthodox conversion Israel give the convert Israeli citizenship automatically? That's a good question. Does it do it automatically? I'm not sure. I don't think it does it automatic, but I think if they do want to live here, I think it's only a small amount of time. I don't think it's a huge amount of time once they've converted to be granted citizenship. I don't think it's automatic. I could be wrong, but I don't think it's automatic. I think it's done over time. I don't think it happens straight away. It could. It could be much quicker. I mean, I'm not saying it should take a long time, right? But I don't think it's 100% automatic. But I do think, though, they have an option. I think once someone converts here, that to become a citizen. I think that is the case, though. How much time? Again, it could be a few months. I don't think it's a long time. Someone asked, is feeding one's pets or livestock before a person eats apply to a non-Jew? Cruelty to animal, what we call tsar Rabbi Chaim, also apply to non-Jews. Why should it apply to non-Jews? Because that would make universal sense. That would make sense. Right? You're not allowed to be cruel to animals. Right? So, that being the case, being cruel to animals should apply to non-Jews. So in this case, a non-Jew, they should feed their animals before themselves. Right? I don't know if I would say it's an obligation. Certainly, causing animal distress, abusing an animal, that would be forbidden. That 100% would be forbidden. because that would come under the laws of being cruel, right? Not allowed to be cruel to animals. Now, that being the case, eating before an animal, I don't know, maybe a moral imperative. Could be as a moral imperative, I would say, that they have an obligation. But I don't think it's I don't think it comes under the same category, as being cruel. Like you're slapping an animal for no reason, right? Or you're being exceedingly cruel, or something like that, right? That for sure, non-Jew shouldn't do. But this, I don't know. I don't think it would come underneath that. I think it's a good thing to do morally, but not obligatory. Not obligatory. Yeah. Any other questions? Someone asks, how do you boost your self-esteem without being prideful? Well, one of the most serious problems we have in this generation is that people don't have self-esteem. People have small amount of self-esteem. So a person's allowed to have self-esteem. I don't think there's any question. But even if you boost your self-esteem, I would think, a person should think of all the things they're not in control of. And think about how we're an infinitesimally small speck of cosmic dust. Right? If we think in those terms, how could you be haughty? How could someone have too much pride? I'll give a better example. A person wants to think they're God's gift to the world, and look, I'm so much better than this person, this and that. Think that same thing when you're in the bathroom. And doing whatever you're doing will keep us clean. You can have pride from that? I don't think so. Think about where a person came from. I think you'll be less haughty. You think about that. Or the fact that we're all going to die. We're all going to get eaten by worms. I don't know. A person's going to be proud of that. Well, I'm not going to worry about it now. Things are good. So they're going to think they're God's gift to the world. Bodily functions in an easier way. The famous story, I told the doctor thinks he's in control and he couldn't even control a bowel movement. Right? So that being the case, yeah. Think about that. Self-esteem is good. We all need self-esteem. We all need a little bit of pride. In that sense, to feel good about ourselves. Within reason. But if we think how little control we have over anything, I don't see how a person's going to have pride at all. Someone there points out that someone's an atheist. Yeah, maybe they lost a loved one, or they needed God's help and he wasn't there, or whatever. Could be. But the point is that, people say, where is God when terrible things happen? When there's trauma. When there are, other things that happen that's, hard to deal with, hard to swallow, because we believe God is good. So if God is good, how can there be bad things? How can there be bad things that happen? We see them as bad. But in reality, they're really not bad. They're really good. So if they're really good, how is anything ever bad? Again, it's perspective. The question will be, why did this happen? Or why did that happen? But, you break it down, what does an atheist say? An atheist says, I don't believe there's a God at all. There's no God at all. Now, could be. The main reason is because they've been through a tragedy. And they've been through trauma. And they really want to believe God is good. But how can they believe God is good if they've gone through these terrible things? Right? That's the question. So, but it's not a thought out thing. Because they're not, a lot of these people are probably not even interested in an answer. Right? But I just threw out something because they're going to, they're going to say, not only am I an atheist, not only don't I believe there's a God, I'm convinced there's no God. Now, again, that answer is very easy to answer. Because then you say, wow, you really believe 100% there's no God? They say, yeah, and I'm positive there is no God. So then you say, well, you've learned, you studied philosophy, you studied Jewish philosophy, you studied the Torah. The answer is going to be no, no, no. So that just means they've gone through a difficult time. And they say, okay, so where is God? Okay, that's a legitimate question. But 9.9 out of 10 people that claim, quote unquote, to be an atheist have never researched anything. They never put in the time, they never done the homework. I'm not saying they didn't go through a tragedy. I'm not saying they didn't go through a difficult time. Fine. But that, you want to learn about it? You want to see why things may happen? You want to do research? Okay. They're not doing research. They don't care. They just want to say, I'm angry. My grandfather suffered for no reason. This one got killed by a drunk driver. Whatever. So many things in the world that don't make sense. I agree. Not going to deny it. But you have to understand it, the bigger context. You can't look at individual events. Because individual events don't make sense. Give one example. Person goes to synagogue. Right? So they read the Torah on Shabbos. And the person, calling out the names, calls out this one, that one, the other one to be called to the Torah, scratching your head. Why does this one get called? This one doesn't get called. Right? So the guy there says, what are you talking about? You're new here. This one, this one got called to Torah last week, for something. This one, got called this week for whatever reason. You're seeing things, but you're not seeing the whole picture. So if you don't see the whole picture, how can you comment? You think, well, this doesn't make sense. According to what? According to what criteria? Oh, that's cruel. That's awful. You're right. Even if it is. Even if it is, but you're not seeing the bigger picture. And it could be, even if they do see the bigger picture, they don't want to hear it. Okay. It doesn't mean it's not true. Right? But you're not going to make such a claim, and not look into anything and not do the research. For example, if I were to make such a bold statement and say, I don't believe there's a place called Italy. Right now, before Google and all that. So you're going to say, wow, you have proof that there's no Italy? No, I just don't believe there's a place called Italy. So someone says, well, I have a book here. It's called the Encyclopedia Britannica. I don't know if it still exists, right? He said, look, I open up the book and it says there's a place called Italy. Did you ever research it? No, I just believe there's no such place. Well, you're a fool. You read any books about it? No. You studied about it? No. You researched it? No. So then why are you making a statement? No, because I just believe there's no such thing. No different over here. I'm an atheist and I'm convinced. You read anything about Torah? No. Philosophy? No. Medieval philosophy? Jewish philosophy? No. So what's the answer? You're a fool. You're not an atheist, you're an idiot. Do the research, got questions, let's discuss it. But you don't do the research. No place called Italy. Did you research? No. Get back to me when you're serious. Somebody asks, if no female or male soul is not complete without the other one. Yeah. Someone can't find their other half. Yeah, there's some people that don't end up getting married. That could happen. So what happens? They don't get married. They don't meet their other half. Whatever kid they were supposed to have, they don't have. So God orchestrates it like the Matrix. But it's like a mitzvah you didn't do. A person didn't eat Passover on matzah on Passover. Or you never had kids. Right? I had this question before. So this I want to have kids. His wife doesn't want to have any more kids or whatever. And didn't have kids with her. whatever. He wants to have kids. I said you have one of two choices. Either you get divorced, which I don't necessarily recommend, right? Or you deal with the fact you're not going to have kids through him. You're not going to have kids. But isn't it, a mitzvah in the Torah to have kids? Yeah, it is. And if you don't, okay, you didn't do it. It's a positive command. You didn't do it. Okay. You don't meet the right half for whatever reason. Didn't happen. So that person will not feel the completeness that another person would if they were married. Or what if someone says, what if I was married, but I didn't marry the right one? Okay, same thing. No different. And let's say the person after that doesn't get married. Same thing. Even they married somebody first, who says they married the right one? Right? A Jew, let's say. A Jew marries an anju. They didn't meet the right one. Even if they have kids, doesn't matter. They're not theirs. Spiritually speaking. If they're not their kids, they didn't fulfill the mitzvah. Let's say the kids don't convert. Or the wife doesn't convert. So they didn't fill that mitzvah. So now what? They didn't do it. It's like any command you didn't do. You didn't find your other half. You didn't find it. Now, I'm not going to say it's a good thing, but okay, it happens. There are people out there who don't get married. Or never been married. It happens. Today people don't get married in general, but I'm saying someone who really believes in all that, there are a lot of people unmarried, unfortunately. So if they end up staying not married, so they don't fulfill that mitzvah. Even if they don't have kids. They don't fulfill that mitzvah of having the other half. Well, isn't that a pretty serious thing? Yeah, it is. But I wouldn't tell someone to marry the wrong person because of it, just so they can have that status who says, and if you do that, you're marrying the wrong person. Totally marrying the wrong person. And that gets a whole other discussion we're not going to get into, but how do I know if you married the right person? Right? That's the whole question. Is this really the one I'm supposed to be married to? Yeah, any other questions? All right, if there are no other questions, then I'm going to sign out. I do this every Tuesday and Thursday, 10 o'clock Eastern Time, 5 o'clock Israel time. Anyone has any questions, find me on Facebook at Rabbi Chaim Coffman or Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism. You can send me an email, chaimcoffman@gmail.com, RABBICHAIMCOFFMAN